Hi folks, today I'm going to be building out a NAT lab, specifically port address translation, so your devices can talk on the internet. I'm going to be building this out from scratch here, so just jumping right into it. We're going to get a host on the board here. We're going to get PC1. We're going to get a switch, and we're going to get a router. These are all Cisco IOS, by the way. We're going to cable them up real quick, and then I'm going to add some labels as well, just to make it clear how this network is going to be laid out. It's not going to be very large. We're mostly just sticking to single switch here, which is going to be going to our router. We'll call this VM LAN switch 1. Whoops. There we go. And this will be VM distribution router 1. Okay, I'm going to snap this over here so we can have our CLI window on the right side here. So one second, let me just click this button. That'll open up a terminal for each one. Alright, now we're going to Windows key and right. Or we'll just snap it, why not? And right now they're going to be booting. While they're booting, I'm going to label things just to kind of get an overview of what this is going to look like. Let's see. So the label to start with, we're going to have VLAN 10, which is going to be our client VLAN, and it's going to be in the subnet 10.1.10.0. It's going to be a /24. Let me move that so you can see it. In addition to that, we're going to have a VLAN 30, which is going to be for management. And similarly, it'll be at 10.1.30.0 with a /24. Okay. Okay, so our PC down here is going to have a static IP in the client VLAN. We're going to give it 10.1.10.254. And that'll be in the client VLAN. So this will be an access interface. Access VLAN 10. Okay. Whoops. And that'll pretty much do it for getting our host on the network here. In addition to that, we're going to have a small point-to-point network here. We're going to give it the host 10.1.1.1. It's going to be in a /30 since there's only going to be 2 hosts involved on this network. We're going to duplicate this, and this is going to be for the switch 10.1.1.2. Okay, and this segment here is just going to be layer 3. So we're going to have a route pointing in this direction and then a return route so it can get back. In addition to this, you're going to need the all-important NAT cloud device. This is what is going to allow us to connect out to the internet here. So I'm going to cable it on G01. Okay. Alright, this is basically your basic rundown here of what this is going to look like. We're going to have, let's see here, we're going to have 2 static route entries on the router. One is going to be your default route, which is all zeros, your zeros route, some call it. 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay. Pointing in the direction of the next hop interface here. I don't know what that is yet because this is going to be a DHCP. So this is going to be our outside interface, right? And this is going to be our inside interface. This outside interface is going to be handed out a DHCP address. And then from there, once that DHCP address is populated, we'll be able to fill in the next hop address for this default route configuration here. In addition to this default route, we're also going to have a route for our LAN because it needs a return route to know how to get back to these networks. And the easiest way to do that is just going to be doing a 10.1.0.0 and then specifying a wildcard mask of the first 2 octets. So that's going to be 0.0.255.255. I'm sorry, this isn't a wildcard mask. This is going to be 255.255.0.0 and then a next hop address being the switch interface here. 10.1.1.2. Okay. And beyond that, we're going to be creating an access list. We'll call it NAT inside. And we're going to permit the range 10.1.0.0. And we're going to specify 0.0.255.255. So basically, we're specifying any traffic starting with these 2 octets, so 10.1, to be qualified as under this ACL, right? We're going to use this to identify our private traffic, so it's going to match on this ACL, which we're going to use whenever we configure NAT. One other thing I wanted to mention was that this is going to be your outside interface, right? And then this is going to be your inside interface. So let me label that. Okay. A little cluttered, but that's alright. We'd rather have too much information than not enough. So, so going here, let's first configure the IP address on PC1. So right now, if we do a show IP, we're going to see that no IP address is configured. We could set up a DHCP server on either the switch or the router, but I don't feel like doing that. I figured just for this lab, we'll just keep it static. So we're going to give it an IP address of IP 10.1.10.254 subnet mask. And then our gateway is going to be, let's see here. Let's do an SVI on the switch. So it'll be SVI VLAN 10, and we'll give it an IP of 10.1.10.1. So that'll be acting as our default gateway. Okay. Yeah, let's stick with that. 10.1.10.1. Apply that. So let's see, 10.1.10.254/24 subnet and 10.1.10.1. Okay. So now if we do a show IP, we can see we've got our host address, and subnet mask, and our gateway, which hasn't been configured yet, so we're not going to be able to ping it yet since it hasn't been configured. But the address is set up. One tip is to hit to type save, and that'll actually save the configuration on the VPCS client. So if you end up restarting GNS3, it'll still have the configuration saved. Okay, going to the LAN switch next. We're going to configure this guy. I'm going to go enable, hit enter a few times, then we're going to go to configuration mode. And let me go ahead and get the configurations going here. So we're going to give it a host name. We're going to call it VM LAN switch 1. Let's see. Let's give it a user. Admin secrets Cisco 123. Let's see what else. Let's specify our VLANs. We'll go VLAN 10. We'll give it a name, just client. We'll specify VLAN 30. We'll give it a name, management. All right. Now we'll configure interface G01, which is going to be going to PC1, and then we'll specify the IP address. You don't have to put the description, but it does help document that stuff. as you're going here. This is going to be a switch port, which makes it effectively layer 2 interface. We're going to make it switch port mode access to put it in access mode. We're going to say switch port access VLAN 10, and that'll be it for that interface. So now if I do a show interface status, we can see we've got our nice interface description showing there. We can see it's already connected and it's on VLAN 10 with auto negotiation enabled here. So if I do a show run int G01, we can see all of our configurations here. We've got access VLAN 10, so that's all looking good. Let's now configure the VLAN 10 SVI. This is going to act as our default gateway for PC1 here. So we're going to say interface VLAN 10. This is going to automatically correspond with VLAN 10 as an SVI, a switch virtual interface. So with that, all we really need to do is specify an IP address. So this is going to be IP address 10.1.10.1. Give it a subnet mask, and that's going to be it. So now if we do show IP int brief, you can see it down here. And right now it's admin down, so we're going to have to change that. So we're going to go int VLAN 10. We're going to go no shutdown. And now it should be up. Yep. And we can see the log message here as well. VLAN 10, interface VLAN 10, change status to up. Yep, that's looking good. Cool. So now as a test, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and ping VLAN 10 SVI from the PC just to make sure that's working. Kind of testing things as we're going here to make sure we're doing them right. Okay, that's looking good. And you'll notice in my timeout at first, that's just ARP. Taking a second to resolve the MAC to IP translation. So that's looking good. So let's see, what else do we have to do here? Let's configure G00 going to the router. So this will be G00. I'm going to give it a description. We'll say it's VM distribution router 1. And we'll say G00, and then we'll specify the IP address. Again, you don't have to do this, it just kind of helps long term if you're not looking at a diagram, just to identify an interface and where it's going to. Okay, we're also going to do a no shutdown. Give it an IP address 10.1.1.2. It's going to be a /30. And I just got an error there because as of now it's a layer 2 interface since this is on a switch. So we have to enter the command no switch port, and that'll make it a layer 3 interface. Now if I hit the up arrow again, if I try to enter the IP address now, it'll take it fine. Okay, let's do show IP int brief. We can see our interface there. If I do a show int status, you can see it as well there. And we can see here it's a routed interface. So by doing no switch port, that makes it a routed layer 3 interface, in other words. Status shows connected, so that's good. We've got our nice description. So that's looking good. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and save the configuration. So I'm going to do a copy run start. Copying, but basically we're copying the running config to the starting configuration. Another way you can do that is just typing right. Effectively, you know, accomplishes the same thing. Okay, let's see. What are we missing here? We've got our host name. We've set up our SVI. Both our VLANs are looking good. We're also going to want to configure a static route because this is going over. This is a layer 3 segment, so we're going to need to configure a static route to send traffic downrange here. So what I'm going to do is configure a default route. Let's see, IP route, which the default route is just all zeros for the destination network. For the subnet mask as well, it's going to be all zeros. And then we're going to specify the next hop address being 10.1.1.1. And another nice thing you can do is you can specify a name. It's a good thing you can do. And this is going to be, I'm just going to call it default route VM. Well, I don't know, what should we call it? Default VM distribution router 1. Sure, we'll call it that. Okay, now if we do a show run, pipe section and then IP route, we can see our little entry there. It's got a name and everything, so that's looking good. Okay, now I'm going to do a copy run start again, so I don't forget. Save the configuration. And that'll pretty much do it for the switch. Let's move on to the router. You're going to get this prompt at the beginning. You can just say no. Okay, it's taking a second. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to get a little coffee while I'm waiting for the router to respond. Alright, there it goes. Enable. Okay, so we're going to go into configuration mode. We're going to give it a host name. We're going to call it VM distribution router 1. We'll give it a username. Let's see, we'll call it admin secret Cisco 123. Let me make sure I did that right. Username admin secret. Okay, that works. Okay. Alright, to start, let's configure this interface here, this interface going to the switch. Let's do that first. Interface G00, give it a quick description. We'll call it VM LAN switch 1 G0, well, G00. We'll specify the IP address as well, like that. Okay. We're going to give it an IP address for the interface, 10.1.1.1. It's going to be a /30. Okay, and the other configuration is we're going to do is IP NAT inside. It specifies this as their, our private range. Going beyond this interface, this is all our private traffic. All right, next thing I need to do is make sure I have everything I need here. Let's see, show run interface G00. I want to make sure this is looking good. Oh, forgot to no shut it. And G00, we'll do a no shut. Let's end and then go the up arrow. Check the configuration again. So yeah, we got our description. Excuse me. 10.1.1.1 /30 IP NAT inside. Duplex auto, blah, 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 blah. So that looks good. Let's do a show IP in brief. Make sure we can see the status is up. Looks good. As a quick test, let's try to ping from here to the switch interface here. So 10.1.1.2. Let's make sure we can do that. Might take a second because of ARP. And there it goes. So that looks good. Let's move this over a little bit. There we go. Okay. So at this point, we've configured our inside interface. That looks good. Let's go ahead and configure our outside interface going to the NAT Cloud device. That'll be int G01. We'll just go ahead and do a no shut. Description is going to be NAT1. And then we'll just say DHCP. Okay, we'll say IP address DHCP. So when I do this, it's going to configure this address, this interface as a DHCP interface. So it's going to send out a DHCP discover packet, and it'll get a response at that point. So we just hit enter. We'll give it a few seconds. We'll soon see a log message that states that it got handed out an address successfully. That'll take a second. In addition to that, we're going to configure IP NAT outside as well. And we can see the log message just popped up here. Assigned DHCP address 192.168.122.176. So there you go. This is going to be the public, quote unquote. I say public because it's not technically in a public range, but for the sake of the lab, it's effectively going to function as a public address. To be translated out using NAT, they're all going to be, all of our private devices are going to be sharing this IP address once we get it set up proper. Let's see. What am I missing? IP address DHCP. Let's see. Show run int G01. Let's see what we're missing. We've got description, DHCP, IP NAT outside. That looks good. IP and brief. Yep, that looks nice. Alright, for the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and copy this, put it in the diagram as well. Okay. Now the other thing I'm going to do is check, because I need to configure a static route here, but I need to make sure I'm specifying the correct next hop address. Now the easiest way to do that is just to look at the ARP table, show IP ARP, and look for, there it is, so 192.168.122.1. So that's going to be our next hop for our default route, going to the NAT cloud device. So let me make a note of that real quick. 192.168.122.1. Okay. Let's configure our default route. IP route 000, all zeros, 192.168, whoops, 168.122.1. Nice. Show IP route. Actually, I probably should have given that a name. Nah, that's fine. You know what? Let's do it proper here. Name. Default. NAT1. Sure. Why not? Okay, let's quickly save real quick. Cool. Let's do a show run int G01. Okay, we've got a description, DHCP specified as the outside interface. That's looking good. And looking at our notes here, we've got our first static route entered, which is our default route, our default static route. We also need a static route for all of our LAN address range here. Let's do that real quick. Alright, so I'm going to go back to configuration mode, IP route 10.1.0.0 as the destination address. I'm going to put a subnet mask only specifying the first 2 octets. So what this basically specifies, anything destined for these first 2 octets, or 10.1, is going to match. Assuming we don't have a more specific match in our routing table, but in this case we're just specifying a single static route here. So the next hop address in this case is going to be your 10.1.1.2 going to the switch. We'll give it a name. We'll call it, I don't know, LAN VM LAN switch 1. Sure. Check the config. Okay, so we got both of our static routes in here. IP route, you got your default route, going to the NAT cloud, and then IP route 10.1 blah 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 blah, specifying our private range there. Cool. You can see our interfaces there. Okay, so the next thing we have to do, we got to go ahead and actually configure NAT at this point. At this point, we've configured all of our interfaces, but NAT has not been configured. The only thing NAT-wise we've configured is our inside interface and our outside interface. So we need to create an ACL. I'm going to say IP access list, and then we're going to give it, we're going to say it's extended, and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it NAT inside, which creates an ACL. Okay. We'll give it a sequence number 10. We're going to permit this range. So we got 10.1.0.0. This is going to, so basically right now we're specifying our private range. And the easiest way to do that with this setup, we could get very specific with it and specify, you know, this network, the client network, the management network, which would work fine, but it would require a lot more administrative overhead long term if you added any new networks. So the easiest way about it is just to specify the first 2 octets as the private range. So 10.1.0.0. Oh, did I mess this up? What am I doing? Oh, that's why. Permit IP 10.1.0.0. And then the wildcard bits. This is basically like the inverse of your subnet mask. So that's going to be 0.0.255.255. That's going to specify to match on these first 2 octets. So anything matching 10.1 is going to match on this ACL. Okay. Whoops. Specifying a destination host any. And that's going to be it. Show run pipe section NAT inside. And we can see our ACL here. Okay. Now here's the big moment where we see if this actually works. So we're going to configure NAT using this ACL we just created. So the command is going to be IP NAT inside source list, specifier source list, NAT inside interface. This is going to be our outside interface. We're going to specify that's going to be G01. And then very important, you specify as well at the end overload. That's going to allow it to translate more than just one private IP address. That'll, you know, using port address translation, it'll get multiple translations rather than just one. That's what overload basically does. Okay, so at this point, I've configured NAT. I'm going to try. Okay, so we can ping the Google DNS server. That's what that is. Okay, so to test this, we're going to go to PC1 and see if we can do the same. And look at that, we're getting a response from the Google DNS server. That's good. That's great. Cool. So at this point, you've set up your lab and it's configured with NAT. So if you were to want to say put like a Windows machine in here, you could do that and connect it off to the internet. You could set up a Linux box. There's a lot you can do with this setup. You can make, you know, you can have a very simple lab like this. You can make much larger labs. You could have like a multi-access situation where multiple devices are able to, you know, networks able to reach out to the internet. So there's a lot you can do with this. So it's a lot of fun. So anyway, that's all for today, guys. Yep, that'll do it.